Good evening. It is 6 p.m. Welcome to the Korea Society. We're delighted to have you here for what will be a very special hour. I had the pleasure of sitting at Bloomberg with Wong Maye-E for an event that had been organized by the Association of Asian Journalists, and it was a dynamic group. And the two of us spoke from New York with about 5 cities online. And while they relegated the political, military, boring material to myself, the really exciting part for me was her presentation of really some quite amazing photography, which you will see here. I think at a time when media viability and media freedoms are under challenge, the important work of photojournalists like Wong Maye is critical. It adds so much nuance, and as we've just finished a summit, and as we here at the Korea Society converse regularly over policy issues, I think it is the significance of artists like Wong Maye who add much depth to our understanding. You will see that her work is beautiful, it is noble, and it is ennobling, I think, of the peoples of North Korea. And I think that helps us understand things in a new way and with really great and enhanced depth. So I'm just on a personal as well as professional level very grateful to her. I also wanted to take a minute before we start our dialogue and introduce you to the Associated Press Vice President and Editor-at-Large, John Daniszewski, and the former AP Photo Director, Santiago Leon. As you will hear, they were brave souls as well to help set up the AP Bureau. So please, if you'd like to offer us some comments, we're grateful to both of you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Well, for those of you who don't know, the AP is a not-for-profit news cooperative that spans the globe. It works in print and photos and video. And we take pride in having bureaus almost everywhere, but North Korea was a place where we had never been able to get in. So beginning around 2011, we began a series of negotiations with the U.S. representative, or the UN representative here in New York, Ambassador Han, trying to sell him on the idea that the AP was an objective, independent organization and wouldn't be a fine thing if the AP could have a bureau in North Korea. And we tried to do this in a transparent way. We were telling the other governments in the region what we were doing, nothing secretive about it. But we were making a strong case, and for whatever reason at that point in time in 2011, they seemed open to the idea of letting a Western news organization come in, albeit in constricted circumstances, because when we would go there, we, of course, would be subject to all the laws and restrictions that journalists face in that country, which is about the worst in the world for freedom of information. But anyway, we saw ourselves as opening a door, leaving it a little ajar and getting the North Koreans used to Western journalists. And it's hard to imagine even now, only less than a decade later, how unknown North Korea and the images of North Korea were in the West at that time. So I think I'll let Santi take up the story of our adventures as we went to open up the Bureau.
Thanks, John. So it was quite the adventure. We had to travel to Pyongyang on a number of occasions to negotiate the opening of the Bureau, which was no small task. We had endless meetings, seemingly endless meetings in conference rooms where everything needed to be translated, and there was a great deal of suspicion and a great deal of trepidation on the part of our hosts. And we gradually began to formulate a plan which involved negotiating all the minutiae of the bureau, where it was to be, the square footage, and all those sorts of things. But in addition to that, they insisted that we do some things around photography, which we had sort of initially suggested as a way of breaking the ice, because photography is a universal language and everybody can appreciate it around the world and look at it in different ways through their own prisms and filters. So we had had some success in previous years in Cuba opening some doors using photography and doing exhibitions. And so we suggested that that might be a way forward in North Korea. And they embraced that idea. And what we ended up doing as part of the opening of the Bureau was firstly doing a photo workshop in Pyongyang for photographers from the Korean Central News Agency, which is their sort of official state news agency. So we brought in a couple of photographers and editors, and we spent 3 days explaining photojournalism to these North Korean photographers: storytelling, access, daily life, independent journalism. And they sat there very politely looking at us as though we were crazy. But it was useful in the sense that it helped open some doors. And it also helped us to identify some prospective North Korean photographers with whom we later were able to work, because our presence there was not permanent. We were able to rotate people in and out periodically, but we needed some North Korean staff to help us on the day-to-day news gathering. And then the second thing that we did was to organize a photo exhibit here in New York, a joint photo exhibit between the Korean Central News Agency and the Associated Press. So it was, I think, 100 pictures, 50 pictures each, and we had to negotiate which pictures could be included and which pictures couldn't be included. And that took days and days and days. And I remember at one point I had suggested that we include an AP picture of a woman on a bicycle. And the fellow I was negotiating with, who was Kim Jong-il's personal photographer, he said, "No, you can't have that picture in the exhibit." And I said, "Well, why ever not?" And he said, "Because women in North Korea don't ride bicycles." And I said, "But we have a picture of a woman riding a bicycle." And he said, "Well, I suppose you can include it." And so he let us include it. And then to wrap up, because I don't want to take time away from our distinguished panelists here, the day that we flew to open the bureau in North Korea, we flew into Beijing, and then we went to, the next day we went to Beijing airport and passed through security, and we're waiting to get on the flight to Pyongyang. And all of a sudden our phones start buzzing, and it's the news that Kim Jong-il has died. And we're like, oh, what should we do? And our North Korean contacts at the embassy in Beijing were frantically trying to wave us off the trip, saying, "No, you can't come, you can't come." But we decided we were going to play dumb. And so we got on the plane, and we arrived that evening in Pyongyang. And we got off the plane and went into the terminal building there. And it was like walking into a funeral. Everybody was long-faced. All the people we'd been negotiating with over the previous months were there, many of them with red eyes. They looked very somber.
Many people were crying.
Many people were crying. There were a whole bunch of people we'd never seen before, tough-looking guys in leather jackets. And we attempted for about 20 minutes to negotiate that we'd be allowed to stay and cover the funeral. And we were told in no uncertain terms that that was out of the question. And in fact, here are your bags, and you need to get straight back on the plane that you came in on and fly back to Beijing. And so we left, having come thousands of miles empty-handed.
We really thought that our years of negotiating this entry had all come for naught because of his death. But in fact, a few days later on Christmas Eve, we got a call, first of all, inviting us to come back for the funeral. We always said, we can't do that. But then 6 weeks later, they called us back, and sure enough, Kim Jong-un appeared to be just as committed as his father had been to opening this bureau. So we got it done.
And then subsequently, the photographer who had been covering North Korea for us went on to do other things. And I was running AP's photo department at the time, and I was looking around for a photographer who could do that. And of course, I thought of Maye-E here, and the rest is history.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, John, Santi. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Welcome. Great to have you here at the Korea Society. I know when we left off over at Bloomberg, we said if we have the opportunity, let's sit down. So we hope you enjoy this atop 350 Madison, and we appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. I'm very honored to be here. I've seen a lot of the different talks that you had on YouTube, and I think it's a duty of mine, and I'm doing this because, like I told everyone, this is not about me, but given the rare opportunity that I have, and I've been in North Korea maybe over 35 times, I feel responsibility to share points of view that I managed to capture when I was there. So yeah.
Wonderful. Would you like to begin
Yeah.
to kind of guide us through?
Okay, so let me just start off
Sure.
a little bit by talking a little bit. As Santi left off, he was my director of photography. I remember I was walking down the beach one day doing my morning brisk walk, and I received a call from New York. And he was like, "How would you like to be our point photographer for North Korea?" And I'm like, "I'm not so sure." But of course, I had a lot of talks with the previous photographers, and I guess nothing stacks up to the experience and the rare opportunity that I could. I said I wasn't sure, well, because I have family, and it was a very big responsibility. It involved me traveling for the past 4 years for 10 days at a time every month. So I was literally living out of my toiletry bag and my suitcase for about 4 years. I haven't been in there for about a month and a year and a half, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but it's the usual. Sometimes we come into standoffs with the people that we work with. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you photos, because this is about photos. But we'll talk along the way. You will see my photos contain pictures that show the pomp and the pageantry, the military parades, the stuff that we all know about North Korea to be, the visuals that usually come out of there. Their big military parades to celebrate big anniversaries, to show off all their nuclear weapons and their discipline and all the pomp and pageantry, like I said. But what I try to do is, because we have that kind of access and we have built relationships with the people there that we work with, I try, at least for myself, to capture moments that are not orchestrated. Because a lot of times when you go there as a journalist, they let you see what you should see. And people ask me many times, like, do they censor your work? Do they, ask to look at your photos? I say, well, they're a bit smarter than that. They just don't take you where they don't want you to see something. So they kind of do that. But no, they don't censor my work. And you will see that 80% of the work that I have and I'm showing you is actually shot through the car window. I spent a lot of time. I've mastered the art of doing this and doing this. So, but I find that during those times, it's the time where you can actually see daily life around you, right? Having been a bureau, you will see the military, you will see a lot of daily life, and then you will see a set of photos towards the end where being there for a long time has enabled us to kind of negotiate our way into photographing outside of shiny Pyongyang. So we do take trips up to Wonsan, through Kaesong, and sometimes further up as well. And that's when you when you get to see a little bit more of the rougher edges and the more rural life. So why don't we just start to take a look at the pictures, and I'll share some stories behind these photos as we
Great.
go along. But feel free as well to stop me and ask me questions.
Thank you.
So we go for a lot of military parades. They're usually there to celebrate the 70th anniversary of something, or a big birthday, and the military presence is very strong there. And usually for us, we are told and advised to avoid shooting military. But in the parade, of course, they want to show it off. I try to, even though shoot these parades and orchestrated moments, to show that slightly offbeat moments where everything is so perfect. Even their socks are the same height, you know? And I try to capture that in my photos. But at the same time, you know, to me, this photo looked like something a scene out of Star Wars. But it was interesting because it was in the middle of the day and dust was coming up during the goose stepping. I tried it. It's not very easy and it's not very
So
pretty.
the prior three photos, sorry,
Yeah, I can't go back.
are very painterly, right? In a
Very
way.
painterly, yeah.
Did you study art history or photography at an early age, or how do you compose?
Well, so I have a background in graphic design and a bit of photography. I did a diploma in visual communication. So I tend to try to marry art and moment and action, and I see patterns. So I think a lot of us photographers, the compositional part of photography becomes second nature after a while. And that's when you look out for the newsworthiness of photos, the moment of photos. So these photos that you're seeing were from the big military parades. And we usually are put in one corner and we stand there for like 5 hours, including security clearance time. You know, they're very proud of their nuclear work, and the people, when they walk past the leader, we're standing here, the leader's behind us in the balcony. Everyone that walks past starts crying and shouting, Mandai, Mandai, which is like, you know, long live, long life. And they like to put on parades to celebrate everything, even the opening of the new Ryomyong Street, which is very modern. So things have changed since I've been there. You know, they built new high-rise buildings and they celebrate. They have a lot of, this is actually, a lot of you might think that it's Kim Jong-un, but it's actually Kim Il-sung when he was younger. And it's the striking resemblance that I find very interesting. We get to see the leader very rarely, but this was in his early days.
How far are you away when you're taking a shot like that?
Maybe, for this one, it was me here and to the end of the room. So when you go on assignment like that, you never know when you're going to see him. And that's the stress point. We are usually held in a hotel. We don't know if we're going to see him, we're going to be miles away. So we are decked out with full gear. And usually the night before, we have a plan on what's happening during that day. But they usually go, we have a plan, but we can't say what it is because we don't know, which they probably know. And they will say, gather at 6 o'clock in the morning in the lobby. And we're all trying to make, you know, there's a lot of guessing and rumors. And we're like, do we have to wear a suit? You know, it's like you start to weave your way into information. And of course, at 3 a.m., you get a phone call to say, meet in the lobby in 30 minutes. So we go down and we're like, do we wear a jacket? And that's when they go, no, just come down. So we go down there, we hang out for about an hour trying to figure out what's going on. And then they say, please go up and wear your suit. And that's when you get, oh, that's what's going to happen. And then you go into a bus and you get held in the bus for like 2 hours. And then after that, you'll be brought to another room and you'll be held for another 3 hours. And then you go through like security checks, like a 6-layer. It's a longer process if you're going to be ending up photographing KJU than covering the President of the United States. Usually the roll call is like 3 hours. But for KJU, I experienced about a 6-hour security clearance. And I only knew at the 6th hour that we were going to see him. So
I'll ask it because they're wondering, do you bring a good book or what do you do?
I avoid bringing books. So when you get to the airport, they always ask you, do you have any books? Of which then I've learned to just bring a crochet magazine, because how harmful can a crochet magazine be? And a lot of crochet needles and yarn, so yes. Of late, they like to ask you, do you have a laptop? And of which you will get pulled to the side, you take out your laptop and they say, you have movie? And this is when the whole Sony hacking thing and the movies that, you know, came out. And they know how to search your Mac. They go into the Finder and they look for .mov files. Of which then I showed them a funny like exercise video of like Dr. Gillian Michaels, and they were very amused. And they got used to me, and also learning the language a little bit helps. Daily life means a lot to me as a photographer in North Korea because it there's a lot of times being a photographer, a point photographer in North Korea is difficult. I'm always caught between a rock and a hard place because if you shoot anything remotely positive or happy about North Koreans, you have people, criticizing you, saying, "Oh, you're propaganda. You're brainwashed. Oh, North Koreans are brainwashed. They're all pretending. They're like 1,000 people. They're just acting for you." But my response is, and I learn to be kind, but I tell them at the same time that for you who has never been into North Korea to say that North Koreans are brainwashed, you have to be brainwashed yourself to a certain degree. And it's very true. And I don't mean that in an offensive way, but it's like I just needed to highlight that. And when I went there, I had before I went to North Korea, I had stereotypical ideas of the place. You think it was gray, there's no color, people are walking, they don't smile, buildings are symmetrical. I mean, some of them are. And when I went there, I remember, so this photo here, it was the very first time I went into North Korea in 2014. Actually, I went there in 2013. But when I went there, we decided to take a walk. And that was a bit of a surprise for our minders. So we always work with our minder. And I said, I want to go and do daily life. And they were like, what's daily life? I'm like, I just want to see what people do on a daily basis. Can we just take a walk? I mean, nice to see your country. So we go. And they were like, why are you taking that photo? It's not perfect and beautiful. So okay, point taken. I went there and I was at Kim Il-sung Square and I saw children rollerblading. And to me, it's just something I didn't expect to see. It's a Western thing to do, right? Isn't it? And you know what? Immediately, the children started coming to me, laughing and teasing and asking to see the photos. And I think my point is that, yes, we're all very different. We have different governments. We have different ways of life, different cultures. But at the end of the day, we are all people and we are reacting the same. Kids are kids, right? I went there and I started to be sensitive to things like that. I see mothers fussing over children, people looking tired at the end of the day. But, because it's North Korea, they look tired because they're hungry. That's what people think. So I just try to capture more of that. And I try to be fair. And I think the big responsibility and the tough part is that, like I said, if I show anything remotely positive, I get criticized. If I show anything negative, the Koreans hate me. And it's just, I'm steered by the fact, and I have to remind myself that as long as you try to be fair and show what's in front of you. So, of course, yeah, so it's very beautiful. The country is very beautiful. The air is very fresh because there are not many cars. So these are just scenes, and these are all shot through the car window. It's very pastel. It's got a lot of colors. Everyone wears a pin that's North Korean. I'm still trying to figure out who chooses what pin, but they say that it's just personal preference. They have different style pins, and they have murals. So these are moments that I caught that were unorchestrated. And I know this because, a lot of times we just ask to go for a walk. And unless the actors are really good and they come up like a split second for us, I can't prove against that, but I doubt it. You can see a lot of people now using smartphones. They have the intranet, they don't have the internet. And generally residential buildings look like that. But this is Pyongyang, right? Where people are more well off. And a lot of people say, again, it's their propaganda. Well, in my response is, in any part of the world, in any country, the city or the capital is always usually the richest place. So yes, you will see people eating. You will see women carrying handbags. So we got a chance to take the trains, the subways, people commuting, of which they also control the stations that you can get off at. So you do what you can within the limitations. And in every country, there are rules anyway. This is an interesting picture. It was outside of Pyongyang, and it was in they call it an education museum, where it shows the atrocities of the US against the North Koreans. And they hate to be called North Koreans. They like it when you just call them Koreans. These children were actually staring at me, who was with our bureau chief, Eric Talmadge, and they had never seen a white man before. And they were in a museum where they were learning that this white man like killed your uncle or your grandfather. So they just stand there and looked at us. And I think I wanted to ask the child, like, aren't you scared? Because not because of Eric, but aren't you scared looking at the photographs? Because they were quite gruesome, but it's just very indicative of the early age where they're taught all these things about the wars and the war crimes. And of course, a lot of times part of our daily life and my captures is usually from point A to point B. And point A to point B usually is from the hotel to maybe a children's museum where they perform perfectly. But you capture moments on the side of a parade like that. These were girls reacting to me, and they were just really cute. And of course, after being shot, they came and they start giggling like any children would. Of course, wherever they can, they like to show off their missiles. Even in the playgrounds, we have babies playing in like little rocket ships that are made of like nuclear bombs. I wasn't allowed to photograph that, so. This is a shot through our car. We have the same car that we ride in all the time. I think the challenge for me is that in the beginning, when you first go there, everything's exciting. So you want to take photos of everything. And then you go there for the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. And after a while, it's like the Truman Show. The car's the same, the routes are the same, the people are the same, you ride through the same, and you almost stay in the same room. There was once I left a hairpin in the hotel. I came back like a month later, it was still there. It's like they reserved the room for us. And I think that the challenge that I had was, aside from being very restricted in my shooting, I had to keep it fresh. And we do spend days, for me, crocheting in the hotel room because there's nothing else I can do. You can't walk around freely. You're always with a minder, and the minder has his colleagues which are minding him as well. It's very complicated, but we always travel in at least, so there's me, there's Eric, and there's always 2 more Koreans. They never understood why I would take photos of people riding transport or trying to explain to them I would like to go out and just, show how people travel so that the rest of the world can see how similar it is or different it is. And they still have trouble, but they understand, and we start to earn their trust. And
Thank goodness you didn't show them the New York subway.
I was like, their subway's cleaner. So they are very proud of their cold noodles, their naengmyeon. They have a lot of dance parties during celebrations. So we have to build that trust with our minder, where now we because of the relationship and the number of times that we've been in there and we work with the same people all the time, we have a little bit more freedom than other. And I use the word freedom very carefully, but we have a lot more latitude in our movement as opposed to media that go in for other events and they're not familiar with them. So this is people waiting for a bus. There are a lot of electric trams. They use a lot of underpass to get across roads. You don't really see traffic lights. There's still a lot of the traffic women directing traffic. I spent a lot of time in Morongbong, which is like the Moron Hill. It's like their botanical gardens. They do have a botanical gardens, but there are many times when we go in, we have to request for stories that we want to do. And most oftentimes, you ask for ABC. When you go there, you're given XYZ. And in between, there's nothing to do. That's where we have decided. I tell them what I do. They see how I operate, so they tend to let go and agree to let us go out. There's a lot of reservation in doing things that are unplanned. But I think through the trust relationship, we have been able to explore a lot more areas. It takes time. Everything takes time. You have to exercise a lot of patience, perseverance, and a lot of rejection from them. So I try to balance the file with, I mean, people have lives there which are very individual and different, but you can see it doesn't fall far from, it kind of circles back into their respect for the leadership. So this is a typical scene on the street, taken from my hotel room window. There's a funny story behind this. This is Miss Kang. This is just in the corner of the Koryo Hotel in Pyongyang. So it took me 3 years of driving past her for her to eventually acknowledge me. So her name is the same as our driver, Mr. Kang, and the Korean staff that I'm with, they're all men. When I first went in, they were very worried that I was a woman. Because they were first like, oh, it's a woman photographer. What if we go on road trips? How will she pee? And that's all they worried about. And, like, we can't do our man talk, we can't do our things. But I think eventually they realized that, I could be one of the guys too. And I showed them it doesn't matter. I carry my own equipment. You don't have to carry my camera. I can sit on the ground. It's fine. And so I think they gain respect from me in that way. And so in teasing the women, we drive past and they tend to wind down the window and they say something in Korean to her, and she's always very shy. So one day I just decided to wind down my window and go, 안녕하십니까, 강동무. And she was just like, you could see she's like, okay, I acknowledge you, but I don't know you. But that's as good as it gets.
That's great.
In terms of interacting with people, which will then lead me later to share a little bit about this special project which I did as an icebreaker to meet people. So I better move a little bit faster. So we have the #1 department store. It's called the #1 department store there. You can go there. We've managed to convince them to let us go there. And it's a very good indication of what people buy, how they eat, what they shop for, the prices of things. It's interesting because the exchange rate is so different. If you're buying from the local market, it's like I think it was like $10 or $10 to 8,000 won. But if you exchange it in the hotel, it's like $10 to 800 won. Yeah. So I can't change my money back outside, so it doesn't. Yes.
Is that building an empty shell?
Not anymore. I haven't been, but since it was for a long time. So this is the Ryugyong Hotel. It was built by Egyptians, and during the crisis, they abandoned it. And it was started to be built in 1985. It's a 107-story hotel, and it was meant to be a hotel, but we were never allowed inside because it was abandoned. Work was abandoned for a long time, and there were rumors that the elevator shafts were like crooked and all that. But recently, last year, I think they refurbished it and they made the outside like a recreation park, and they've lit it up. But I don't believe anyone has gone inside yet. So it's their pride. It's literally sticking out there. And they have a planetarium. Now they have a sci-tech center, which is even more modern. That's on the way to the airport. So their building stood there empty and abandoned for many years. And they have fireworks, which is like the eighth wonder of the world. They spend all their resources. There was, when we were there in 2003 for the big anniversary parade, and then they had the Arirang mass games, like a whole, show. They used so much electricity to showcase everything. At midnight, I remember we were in the hotel, and all of a sudden there was a blackout in the whole city, and people were freaking out because there was not a sound, not a street light. If you look out the window, it's really nice sometimes to just look out the window at night. Even when there's electricity, you see torchlights, people walking around, going up the house, and we were wondering what was going on. It's because we thought it was going to be a raid, an air raid, but apparently it's because they had used up all the electricity to celebrate. They had just had to shut it off to kind of conserve stuff. So we avoid raw food when we're there, because when you eat, you've got to keep in mind, we always have electricity outages. I can be in a hotel, especially in winter, it blacks out 6 times a night. So you don't want to, eat food in the refrigerator, or you could be in a shower and it goes completely dark, or in an elevator and gets stuck. There was once we went to cover some tourism story in Wonsan, and it was Masik Ryong. It was a ski resort. and I was on the chairlift. And then the power went out. So I was sitting on the highest point of the chairlift in the ski resort for 30 minutes, just thinking it's too far to jump. And I was with a North Korean, and there was awkward silence because he didn't speak English and I didn't speak Korean much. And we just looked at each other and it's like, you okay? Okay. So we kind of did that like 10 times, and then we decided we don't need to do that anymore. So they have amusement parks for people that are privileged enough to go. You have funny random scenes like that in an indoor swimming pool. It's a steam room that the women were enjoying. It was one of the first photos I shot out of there. And people were like, oh, North Koreans have steam rooms, you know. I think it helps that I'm a female photographer as well.
sure.
I have some access to certain things. This is the zoo. This is their favorite North Korean snack called talpi. It's like dried pollock, I can't remember, but dried fish. It goes well with beer. And of course, their cold noodles, Santi's favorite. And this is a Pyongyang cigarette. I bought them because they had smiley faces on them. But I've never tried smoking them because I heard they're foul. And we do a lot of visits to factories. Of course, they like to show us what they want to show us, and they're very proud of their factories and how far they've come economically and what they're doing for the people, and they're self-sustaining. So this is the Taedonggang Metju factory. It's the Taedonggang beer, their home brew. And in front of every factory, you usually see like a huge mural with the leader endorsing it. So yeah, and then you have the textile factory, silkworm factory, where they make silk. And we went to a steel mill. So they always have a lot of propaganda posters. They used to be more anti-American ones, but not anymore. The service staff are all very beautiful women that we were told are handpicked from the countryside. It's the hotel. And of course, this is one of the later photos I shot. This is Ryomyong Street. This is a cinema. And they built that they call it the Chonima or Malima speed, where it's like the horsepower of 1,000,000 horse. And that was during the 200-day campaign by Kim Jong-un to build things at fast speed. So you see the development and how things are changing. You know, the buildings look like something out of the Jetsons. It's very futuristic. They like to, and this is the Murray Scientist Street. So we get to walk around when we request it. It's just playing with my camera. And so then we move on to a little bit of scenes from the outside, and you can see how different it is from Pyongyang. So we have gone to Hamhung. Hamhung is the second largest city in North Korea. It's like an industrial city. They make a lot of fertilizer, and it's actually quite rough still, you can tell. We travel on long highways. You often see people walking on the highways, and oftentimes you ask yourself, where are they going? So this is close to winter, and you see them gathering what they can, preparing, hunkering down to prepare for winter. This is a lake on the way to Wonsan, and this was frozen, and this was when it was not. So I get to see the seasons. The seasons keep it fresh for me as well, you know, because like I said, Truman Show, right? So it helps when there's snow, it changes the landscape. So you get to see things like that. This is the Masikryong, the ski resort. It's actually quite amazing. They pump in a lot of money. It's one of Kim Jong-un's projects. This is Wonsan, the Japan Sea. It's supposed to be developed into the tourist hub. This is where we drive along the way to Wonsan. And this is Hamhung. You can see it's rougher, there's more construction, it's very rural. People do their things, some are showering in the river. And they're not usually very happy when I take photos like that, but they don't stop me. But for me, I have to think like, you know, what it's worth in the story, and I tend to try not to self-censor, but I have to think about long game as well and build my trust and be patient with that. It's very, very, very tempting to sometimes show everything that you can show, but I think operating in North Korea is very different in that sense, where you have to think long game and you have to do things bit by bit. There was somebody, we were we were in Pyongyang when we had the AP Board of Directors meeting, and we were doing it from Pyongyang. We called in. And so we were talking about what we were doing, and one of them asked me, is there something that you really still want to do in North Korea? And my answer to him is a joke, but it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it was, a day in the life of Kim Jong-un. I doubt that's ever going to happen, but we never thought they would shake hands with America, right? So you never know. So these are scenes. I'm coming to the end. Sorry. And stop me anytime, okay? So we get to visit farms. Oof. Is this working? So this is in Wonsan. So there's something that's natural yet not from the scenes there. Like people wear the same thing. It's a bit like something out of Tim Burton movie for me. So I try to show the quirkiness and yet real life and try to balance that. So I come to the end of the major presentation, but I have a very interesting story to tell you. So it was a very quiet news day. There was nothing going on, so I kind of had to negotiate. We do a lot of that. Negotiate my way into shooting daily life. I said, can we go ride the subways? So after a long explanation, and it's like begging them to kind of like, I just want to just experience it. We go, and we ride the subway, and one of them is with us. The other one goes with the car to pick us up at the other 3 stations. And so we were riding it, and there's no cell phone signal. When we're there, we get local cells, which foreigners are given a different number from locals, so you can't call each other as well. We were riding subway, and we were coming out the subway, and we have Mr. Cha waiting on the other end, like looking really impatient, and we're coming out with Mr. Kim. And as we come up the escalators, they start talking Korean, and we kind of know something's up because they look a bit stressed, and we're like, what's going on? And they were like, nothing. So we go, and we finally go to the car, and as I enter the car, Mr. Cha looks at me, Miss Maye-E and Mr. Eric, are you hungry? And we're like, are we hungry? It's kind of odd. It's like 5 o'clock. We're like, no. Then they were like, but we are hungry. I'm like, well, I guess we've got no choice, right? You're driving the car. So we drive. We don't think too much about it. We get to this place called the National Club, Korean National Club. And we get out. We were there just yesterday for lunch. And when we go into those buildings, there's a restaurant upstairs. And then they take you down this dark corridor into a separate room for foreigners. So nothing suspicious about that. We get out of the car, and Mr. Kim looks at me, Miss Maye-E, please remember, bring camera. I'm like, yeah, I always bring my camera, it's fine. It's like, no, bring camera. I'm like, okay, fine, I got it, I was like, do you want me to take your photo or what? He's like, no. So we go upstairs, and we see like big size, like very square jaw, tall Korean men standing around. And of course, they don't like Eric because pick on the white guy until they were like, come in. So we're like, we go inside, we walk up, and we're like, yeah, we're going to eat. We were here. They're hungry. Walk upstairs, and then they lead us to the back room, and we're like, okay, they don't want us to sit with the locals. We go in the room, and we're like, I'm thinking, we're going to eat, what am I going to eat? We open the door, and oh my God, it was this room. And Jeffrey Fowler was sitting. So Jeffrey Fowler, for those of you not familiar, he's a U.S. detainee who was freed. He was, I think he was detained for leaving a Bible in a club or something. In a restaurant. Yeah. And at that point, we were like, oh my God, what's happening? And my brain's going, we're going to eat, but we're here. And I'm like, that's Jeffrey Fowler. And Eric's like taking out 2 of his phones. And he's like, okay, Mr. Eric, you have 7 minutes to interview him. I was like, my camera's here, is it working? Wow. And at that point, so we have 7 guys standing in the room, like security men looking at us and videotaping us. And I was like, okay. So we start the interview, and then he put it there, and we start to interview, and you can see like the desperation, because it was the first time Jeffrey Fowler had met with anybody since he was detained. And we were like, okay, so we were asking him questions, we do our interview, and then finally we're done, we go outside, and the whole time I'm like, we're supposed to eat, but I'm working on autopilot, I'm just confused, right? And then I'm looking, I'm like, come on, Mr. Kim. It's like, and me and Eric are like, what just happened there? But, oh, great, it's a scoop. And we walked down the corridor, and then we got shoved into another room, and we're like, oh my God, it's Matthew Miller. And the room is smaller, and the guys get bigger, and they're videotaping us again. And it's another US detainee. This guy landed in North Korea, tore up his visa saying, I want asylum in North Korea. So we interview him, and when you meet a detainee and you kind of want to say things, he wants to say things to you, and when he shook our hand, he like squeezed it tight, and he's like crying, and we were like, sorry, we can't say much, but we had to ask, will you coach in any way during your blah, blah, blah. So they were asking for help, and they were appealing for the US government to come and help them. So we were done with that. And we were walking down the corridor, and at the same time, what just happened again? It was a bit of it's so confusing. Me and Eric kept looking at each other, and we're like, this is great, right? But I'm so confused. Walk down the hall, and then we get into another room, and it's Kenneth Bay. Kenneth Bay was, he was a travel guide, and then he's also a missionary, and he was arrested for plotting to overthrow the government. And the room was even smaller at this time. And there were like 7 guys videotaping us, recording everything, taking photos of me, taking photos. Sometimes I just take photos of them just to annoy them. But it's not fair game. So, and he was sentenced 15 years jail. So we interviewed him, and we came out, and finally we get to the car. And I look at Eric, I said, I'm so stressed out. I was like, what just happened? I thought we were going to eat. So, I'm not fixated on eating, but it's just the mindset. And then I look at Mr. Kim and Mr. Cha, and they were like, I'm sorry, Miss Maye, we couldn't tell you. We were sworn not to tell you, but you should be happy, it's a scoop, right? So I'm like, so next time, if something like that happens, and you ask us, are you hungry? Kind of like wink. So this is to end the main photo show. So this photo was taken by me on my very first trip to North Korea. We went to visit the Fatherland Liberation Museum, which is new. I was with John and Santi. Were you there? I can't remember. I was too confused. I was with John. It's my first trip there, and KJU was visiting the museum. Of course, you're miles away from him, but you can always hear when he's around because people are shouting, Mandai, Mandai. And I was like, I want to be at the end because I want to see him coming out. So I heard the echo coming. No one was chasing me away, and it was coming and coming closer. And after a while, I'm like, oh, I'm in the scrum. And it was just me and the CNN guy and I was this close to him. And that's me with the camera. So that was a fun story. I have photos of him. He has photos of me. KJU just happened to be there in our picture. So this was the picture of me on my first day with the rollerblading. So sorry that took so long.
No, wonderful.
But yeah, so that was that. And just a very, very quick wrap up. In order to try to break the ice, I've been carrying an Instax camera with me for the past 3 years, collecting portraits. This is where you're not allowed to talk to people in public. But I managed to negotiate with my minor, and I tell him, hey, I want to get to know people and experiment something. So what I do is if I see people far away, and I warm up, I'll take a Polaroid picture of them, and I'll give it to them. And that usually breaks the ice because they're not suspicious of what you do. They're very suspicious of foreigners, let alone journalists. So I give it to them, and then I take a photo with the SLR. And I ask all of them the same questions. I say, can you tell me a bit about yourself? And I ask all of them, what's your life motto? And they all have different life mottos. For them, they said, our life mottos is to have many children. I'm like, wow, a real answer. And then they said, so that they can serve in the army and protect the leader. And so I had 50 different things. These women were at the beer hall. And I said, what's your life motto? They were like, we want to make the people happy, and I love my job serving beer. I want to make people happy for the rest of my life, as the leader has made us happy. So what I'm trying to say is it's a very interesting society. Everyone lives different lives, but it's still overshadowed by the leadership. So just a little bit, and I should stop and open for questions, but thank you for listening to me. And there's so many stories, I can't tell them all. But yeah, so this is basically what I do.
Thank you. Brilliant.